Now, let me see. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Prime Strings. I'm Henriette, and it's good to see you here. Today is the first of what I hope will be a regular occurrence, these live sessions on YouTube. And today we have a session on questions and answers. So you can ask me any violin-related questions, and I will do my very best to answer them. The list of questions can be endless. It can be about technique, it can be about bow hold, it can be about your instrument, it can be about a repertoire that you would like to play, anything. And I will, as I said, do my best to answer your questions. And that means that if I'm going to answer questions, that the session is very much driven by you. So I'm delighted to see that people are coming in. I'm hoping that you might be able to write your questions in the text box. On my screen, there is a text box on the right-hand side. So I will do my best to read your questions there if you have any. Today, because it's the first one, we are going to give a practice diary for free to any new subscribers on the day. So do subscribe to my channel, and there are lots of videos there about violin technique and about, we have a new series that is just coming out right now and that I'm still filming, Learn to Play the Violin in 30 Days, and we're using the Suzuki method. So if you're interested in receiving updates on when each new video is released, do subscribe to the channel and hit the bell button, which means that I can send you notifications when every new video has come out. So we also do a monthly new thing where we give a free DVD to a randomly selected person. So we have one DVD set, I must say, of the DVDs that I have on violin technique. So you can learn, there are lessons on there with, for instance, bowing technique, vibrato, tone building, any sort of thing. So if you've not already done so and you would like to be updated, and you would be interested in taking part in this competition, as it were, it's more a lucky draw, I must say, do please subscribe to the channel. So I'm ready when you are. Go ahead and ask me any violin-related questions. So I can see that a couple of people have joined us. Very, very warm welcome to you. And if you have a question about violin playing that you have come across, do go ahead and write them in the chat box. Now, earlier this week, somebody asked me a question on YouTube about my bow hold that I promote. And I can answer this question here. I can't see who you are if you've joined us, so perhaps that was you, maybe it wasn't. I was showing the bow hold as I teach it to beginners. And I was saying, okay, you have your thumb bent and your middle finger opposite as if to make a ring like that. And my bow is just sitting here in between. My other fingers just come down and my little finger comes on the side edge here with my pinky being bent there. And the question this person asked me is, how far over the bow should your index finger be? Now, there are a lot of issues here suddenly when we answer this question. First of all, every hand shape is different. Some people, when you look at the hands like that, some index fingers are slightly longer than others, and you have to work with what you have, obviously. And then there are very different levels of players. So I'm not saying mine is the only one, but this is the bow hold that I teach to beginners because it promotes more flexibility. And the issue was, I am touching my index finger near the top joint, as you were here, this joint, and then near the top of my middle section of my index finger. Other people might teach a bow hold where your index finger is further over. Now, I find that this is a slightly more tense bow hold than when you have it slightly looser. Having said that, at the same time, this bow hold is perhaps a little bit less steady than the others. But for me, what I want to achieve in beginner classes is that you play with as little tension in your bow hand as possible. So you'll find me doing lots of exercises like that where I try to pull the bow out of people's fingers just to check that they are not squeezing it tight like that. Okay, so if you find yourself really gripping the bow and being careful not to drop it, which is a well-known issue amongst violin players, I would suggest you try to hold it a bit more loosely, and that may incorporate just keeping your index finger slightly less far over the bow. Okay, so in the first instance, I'm going to try and let people play with as little grip on the bow as is possible, and that will stand you in good stead in the first couple of years of violin playing, and later on we will develop that bowing because I'm looking to build a balance. And you can perhaps see that my bow is almost seesawing on top. I'll lift my fingers now so you can see, on top of my thumb, you see, and I can manipulate the bow like this, let it be a little bit lighter on the string if I press more with my pinky. And you will find that as you progress with your violin playing, the muscles this side of your hand will develop greatly because they are sort of pushing my pinky down, as it were. Okay, so this way I can play with less pressure. You can imagine the string being here somewhere. Less pressure, I'm lifting the bow off, or more pressure, and now I'm tilting my hand to go towards my index finger so that I can play with slightly more pressure. Why would I want to play with slightly more pressure? Because I might want to go louder, or I might play very fast notes where I need to control the bow a lot more. So this, if you haven't ever done this exercise, I would definitely recommend you see if you can get this sort of balancing act going, up and down, creating more or less pressure. Of course, we can also steer the bow, and we can steer it from left to right. I'll just change the angle. Look, you see, if my pinky presses more like that, you can see that the heel of the bow goes away from me, so the end of the bow that's near the bridge comes closer. Or I might achieve the opposite effect and I'll bend my pinky more. That way I manipulate the bow, the point of the bow, to go much further forward. So I might steer the bow away from the bridge and go towards the fingerboard more, for instance, when I want to play slightly quieter. So we've got two different ways of manipulating the bow now: up and down, left to right, forwards, backwards, shall we say. And then, of course, there is the rolling between the fingers, and I can play more on this side edge of the hair as opposed to playing more on this side edge of the hair. And you can try that out for yourself to see what gives you different sound quality. I'm not going to tell too much about what happens, but you will find that when you play more on the, what shall I call this, outer edge of the hair, your bow stroke will be much more gentle. When you're more flat on the strings, you get a louder sound. And this, if you're a lot further advanced and you want to create some more tone color, you can definitely experiment with the angle that the bow is on the string. So you play with the full amount of hair on the string, or you can play more on the side, or perhaps more on that side. Okay, so go ahead and practice your concertos or your studies or whatever you're learning, and see if it makes a difference to the quality of the sound. Now, that is a whole lot of information suddenly. Try and make a difference for the quality of the sound. That means that you're going to perhaps listen more carefully and find out what sort of sound quality that you're after. So there are 1,001 combinations, of course. You can go up and down, forwards and backwards, and rolling, and I would definitely try that. You can then combine that with using longer bows or shorter bows, and you can hear different qualities of sound, and that is when things get interesting. So if you have a piece that you can already play really beautifully, where you don't need to worry about which notes to play, go ahead and experiment a little bit with your bow control by moving it in those directions. So now I've diverted a little bit from the question of how far does your index finger go over, but that you might experiment with that as well and see if that works for you. Like I said, there are many different ways that you can become a good violinist. In my native language, Dutch, there is a saying that says, many roads lead to Rome, and that's definitely the case. I start off teaching my pupils by holding the bow here, this in this knuckle, just right there, initially, but there are other teachers who prefer maybe to give you a bit more control and to go over a bit more. But like I said, that is not my choice, because I am straight up from the beginning, I am encouraging a more relaxed bow hold. And you'll find that promoting relaxation in violin playing is quite difficult, because there isn't actually any action in everyday life where you have your violin up or something up on one hand and you do something completely different with the other hand. It's almost like patting your head and rubbing your tummy, isn't it? And that's not so easily done. So the first inclination of people is always to grip the violin really strongly and to grip the bow really hard as well, and trying to achieve. But my aim is to let you relax first before we start doing other exercises. So that's why you find me teaching you to play very slowly at first as well, so that we get more control. It's always easy to start to speed up people's playing. It's not so easy to get them to slow down once they have started learning to play much faster. So let the questions come, please, and I'll try and answer them as well as I can. Anyone has another question? Another question that I sometimes get asked is, what instrument do I play? I play a Daniel Royer violin, a modern one. It was made in 1986. And for me, it serves me really, really well, because it's like an all-rounder. I'll tell you a little story, actually, how I got to play this instrument. I was at conservatoire and I was playing on my old student violin, and my teacher said to me, you need a better quality instrument, because you are trying to achieve things that your instrument can't actually produce, sound qualities and sound colors that your violin doesn't actually have. So you need to upgrade your instrument. And I was looking for an instrument which was quite sweet in tone and not very loud, and which felt easy to play to me. I mean, these are all qualities that are very subjective, of course. Some people are more extrovert, so they might go for a louder instrument, or they might find a bigger instrument nicer to play, and so on. But that was my choice, something really sweet in tone and easy to play, i.e. with a fairly small neck. I'm not saying that this is a small neck, but it suits my hand fine. And I couldn't really find, I went to many different violin makers, and I couldn't really find some instrument that ticked all the boxes. So my teacher, long last, he got very desperate, and he said, well, why don't you try my violin then? And I tried it, and I said to him, look, this is exactly what I'm looking for. Now, luckily, my teacher had this violin made for a string quartet that he played in, and the maker had made the whole string quartet. So they were all playing on a Daniel Royer cello, 2 violins and a viola. And he went to listen to one of their concerts, and afterwards he said, actually, I am going to make you a new violin, because this violin doesn't quite fit into the sound of that quartet. So my teacher then said, well, when my violin is finished, why don't you speak to your parents and see if they can buy that violin? So this is how I came to buy my violin. So I play a Daniel Royer violin made in 1986. I'd like to know actually what violins you play, and you might just write there Stentor 1 or Stentor 2, and it's all good. And why do you like to play your violin? We have got a discussion forum actually in our Friends of Foreign Strings Facebook group, and every month we have a discussion, and we invite people to connect with us and to tell us a little bit about us, because I love to get to know all my online students, and that is perhaps one of the drawbacks of online teaching, is that you don't get to know the people so well. But if you have something to say, please go ahead, and I'll be really, really happy to comment on your playing or on anything that you want to ask. So if you have any questions, go ahead and ask the question. There is a text box on my end of on my screen, so if you have a question, please type it in and ask me. So something else that I might tell you is that people always ask me what strings they should play. Now, let me tell you a little bit about violin strings. You may or you may not know this already. So I play on just simple dominant strings. And why do I play on Thomas Dick dominant strings? Is because they last me very long, and they don't change too much when the weather changes, and they are just a really good sort of all-rounder string. On my violin, they sound really, really good as well. So I'm happy with the sound, and not one of the strings sounds louder or different in quality than one of the other strings. So those are my reasons for choosing this string. Now, you might say, oh, when I put 4 of the same strings on, my E string sounds much louder, or my G string sounds much, much louder than the rest. And then it's well worth experimenting with. Speak to your violin dealer and see if there is a string which is perhaps a bit warmer or a bit sharper in sound, or whatever you're looking for. So I used to play on Eudoxa strings, but I found, because my hands are quite sweaty, the aluminium winding, the silver winding around the string came off very, very quickly, and it just very quickly turned into a very expensive thing to have to replace my A string, for instance, really frequently. Another person might say, oh no, I don't have that issue at all, but I find the sound of the Eudoxa strings much more gentle. That is a perfectly valid comment, and that would work for some people, definitely, yes. So let me know if you know what sort of string you play on. It may be that you never even change your strings. So the next question might then be, how often should you change your strings? Of course, that depends very much on how much you play. And it is a good habit to always, once every couple of months, check your strings if they still ring in the same pattern. So I don't know if you can see that actually. If I just pluck my G string, you can see it expands, the vibrations expand the string, and then they gradually come back in. I'll do that again, see if you can spot it. I'll try to hold my violin still a bit. You see, they go out and they come gently back in, and there's only one sort of going out and going in. Let me see my D string. What sound does that make? That's also a fairly new string. Now, if you find your string, when you pluck it, it expands, goes back in, and then expands again, it is time to replace your strings, because they should go out once and then come back in. The other day, I had one pupil who had an E string, whose string I plucked like that. Now it's more difficult to see on the screen with E, and her string was completely flat. It didn't expand at all. It was just a little ping, and that was it. And she desperately needed a new A string. There was no more ring to it. So strings can be fresher and older, and they lose their shine after a certain while of playing. It very much depends, but as a golden rule, you could say change your strings about every year or so, depending on your purse as well, because changing a whole set of strings is not that cheap. And you also always want to change your strings one by one, because a string takes about 2 weeks to play in properly before it reaches its full quality. So you don't want to put it on and the next day put another string on, because then you're going to be tuning quite a lot. So if you put one new string on and then a month later or so replace the other one, and then another couple of days later, a couple of weeks later, replace the other one. So gradually change them one by one rather than all at the same time. So, have we got any more questions? Can I think of any more questions? If you're here and you're a beginner, I'm hoping that you might perhaps join in with our Suzuki violin course that I'm doing. I'm not a trained Suzuki teacher, but I very regularly teach from the Suzuki method. So we're jumping about in the book a little bit, but it doesn't matter because, like I said, many ways lead to Rome, and you will become a very good player with this method. And most importantly, we're going step by step, and we're doing it very, very slowly. So you'll find detailed conversations about how to place your finger and what to do with your bow, how to play long bows, how to play shorter bows, and so on. So if you're a beginner, check out those. If you're a much more advanced player, the last series that I've recorded were dominant and diminished sevens. And I've recorded those because my own students are taking the grades, and this is exam season again in the month of March. So lots of my students are taking their grade exams, and lots of them find that the most difficult part of the technical requirement, the dominant and diminished sevenths. So I thought, you know what, I'm going to give my pupils the opportunity to practice with me together. And so I've recorded those, and they also go very slowly, step by step, and you can work out what a dominant or a diminished seventh actually is and how it is made up, what you're being tested on, and also how to play it, what it should sound like. And then we'll practice it time and time again, separate bows and slurred. So there is another series of courses that I've recently recorded. At Christmas time, there are a whole lot of Christmas carols that you could join in and learn to play from. So there's lots of that. And there are also just technical exercises, like I just showed you my bow exercises. There are technical exercises about vibrato and about bowing technique. So have a look at the channel, and you will find that there's lots there to explore. I've also recorded at some point in the past the Kuchler Concertino, Opus 15, which is always a firm favorite, and I will probably do a bit more of that. There's 3 movements to it, and I go through each movement step by step, teaching you how to play it. And a lot of people have commented that that is actually helpful to them. So if that might be helpful to you as well, go ahead and have a look at those videos. So, have we got any questions that I might be able to answer? Let me think of one more thing, a question that somebody else asked me. Yes. Somebody has asked me when to start playing the Kreutzer etude. They are one of the highlights of the violin literature, and certainly one of the highlights of the violin pedagogy. So if you are an advanced player, I don't know whether people who are joining in are beginners or intermediate or advanced players, but I would say that I would use the Kreutzer studies fairly early on in graded terms. I would say towards the end of grade 5, by the time you're grade 6, you might be able to start it. That's also because I teach double stops fairly early on, and they will be very rudimentary double stops initially, but in the Kreutzer studies, there are lots of double stop studies there for you to explore. So certainly when you are about grade 6 or 7, I would expect you to start with Kreutzer number 2. That is my most useful exercise, and that is really an exercise for moving the bow strokes and playing long détaché notes. So that is an exercise for using your elbow and seeing how well you can stretch your elbow. So if that's you, go ahead and have a look at the Kreutzer studies and find number 2 is a really, really good bowing exercise there. If there are no other questions, then I am going to round up this session, and I'd like to say thank you so much for joining me today. I've really enjoyed this session, and I hope that you have too. And we will do a similar session, perhaps early April or so. I will let any subscriber know when it is due. So thank you for watching, and I wish you every success with your violin playing. Do subscribe to the channel, because then you may be the lucky winner of our DVD set. For now, all the best to you from the team behind and me at Pram Strings. Goodbye. Nice to see you.